Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer number BB5006-500-630. This is a hinge. This is not your average hinge for three reasons. And what I mean by that is it's larger than average, it's substantially heavier than average, and that it's made of solid stainless steel. So not your average hinge. And where would you use this atypical hinge? Well, probably an application where you had something heavy, something thick, and something exposed to the elements. So let's dissect the part number and we'll touch on those points. This is a BB hinge, ball bearing. You can see that there are 4 bearing packets here. The 5006 means a number of things. First of all, it means it's 5 knuckle. You can see why it's 5 knuckle. It also means that it's full mortise. You can see from the swag on the hinge leaves here, okay, where the leaves are bent, that the door and frame are meant to be parallel, or pardon me, when the door and frame when the door is in the closed position and the leaves are parallel, they're meant to be mortised flush to the edge of the door and to the rabbet of the frame. So that makes it a full mortise hinge. It also makes it a heavyweight hinge. And in this 5-inch size, it ought to be 190 thousandths thick. Let's see what the caliper says. Caliper says 0.185. So that's certainly within reason. And that means that it is a heavyweight hinge. So it's heavier than average. It's a thicker gauge leaf. Also means that it is a stainless base material. That's also inferred specifically in the 6 part of that part number. Okay. Moving forward, the 500, that means this hinge is 5-inch tall and 5-inch wide. Okay. The height is the first dimension on hinges. The door, if you were to size a door, it's a 3.0 by 7.0, or in this case probably larger in width at least, potentially, or thickness. But the height is the first dimension. Now that's important to know because not every hinge like this is a square. Some are rectangular. You can have a 5 by 8. You can have a 4.5 by 4. You can have a 4 by 3.5. You know, you can have 4.5 by 6. These are all common sizes. The important part is to know what prep you're doing in the door and frame. If you ordered a 5 by 6 hinge, not unusual, not unheard of, you don't want to prep 6-inch height on the door and frame. That would be 5-inch because the width is 6-inch. So this is a 5 by 5. Okay, a common hinge in this would also be 5 by 4.5. That would tell me that it's likely 1 3/4 inch thick door. But this is a 5 by 5, and that could be used for either a thicker door than average, maybe a 2-inch door, maybe a 2 1/4 inch door. And that's what I'm thinking when someone orders 5 by 5, because you wouldn't use a 4.5 wide, even though you possibly can on a thicker door. But generally, as the thickness of the door goes, the width of the hinge from the back edge of the leaf to the center line of pivot increases as well. It's not an absolute rule. The absolute rule is that you specify the thickness of the width of hinge that the application calls for. A 5 by 5, I'm guessing it's a thicker than average door. Or they have a standard 1 3/4 inch thick door, but they have the requirement to have that vertical axis of pivoting of the barrel stick out a little bit further than a standard hinge would require. The fact that it's heavyweight certainly tells me that the door is either wider, taller, heavier, thicker, all of the above, one of the above. So that all conspires together to mean, yeah, it's probably a pretty massive door that they're hanging with a hinge that is, 50% thicker than the average hinge, 20% greater capability of handling the load because it's 5-inch versus 4.5, that it's made of solid stainless with a brushed finish, which is the most durable of all natural finishes. If someone says to you, I need the most durable finish, I don't want it to wear off, everything will wear off. And everything will rust, even stainless, but this would be that. And that's the 630 part of the part number. Okay, the 630 means it's made of solid stainless. It's a 304 stainless, by the way. And that it has a brushed finish. You can also do this hinge in a 629, which would be the same base material, but it would have a polished finish. Be polished stainless steel is what we'd have there. Okay, and that dissects our part number. Let's switch to the screen view where we can take a look at some supporting documentation. Okay, so continuing on, looking at the item here in front of us. Here's our part number. 5x5 ball bearing heavyweight 5-knuckle stainless steel hinge for heavyweight or high frequency doors. Stainless steel hinge with a stainless steel pin. It's template. We're going to go over that in a moment. Ball bearing 5-knuckle, 4 ball bearings. 4 ball bearings is directly related to heavyweight. If you had a standard weight, it would have 2 ball bearings. Non-rising yet removable pin is standard. We'll go over the options in terms of security on this in a moment. Button, tip, pin, and plug. What that means is what that looks like is the tip on the pin here is what they call a button tip. It looks like the button on your coat is what they're going after with that. 190 thousandths, we talked about that. Screws are included. I'll show you those at the end. 8 holes, that goes with template. And the image that they're showing here is possibly generic. Now this link here to the cut sheet, that is handy because okay, the link to the cut sheet shows you the dimensional properties of the holes in the hinge leaf. Now this is also referred to, this pattern is also referred to as the template pattern. So this document, we could call it a template because it's basically a technical drawing of the item, meaning it will provide the person responsible for prepping the door and frame for this hinge the details necessary for doing so, as it relates to the hinge itself. This template is good for all 5-inch high hinges, but 4-inch wide, 4.5, 5, 6, 7, and 8. The only thing that really changes is going to be the A dimension, the edge of the leaf to where the bend starts. Okay, the swag line, they call it. Hinge edge to the swag line. Different columns here indicate different hinge types. And what you'll notice is the last digit changes as the base material changes. Okay, so we can do these in a standard hinge or a wide throw. The 1 means wide throw, and that's why you'll see these as 6, 7, and 8 only. You can also do this as a 3-knuckle hinge. That's the LB version. The BB is a 5-knuckle. LB is a 3-knuckle. Okay, now there's also a link to a document called Cut Sheet, and that document is awfully handy because it will allow us to review the BB5006 and its sister products, the 4 and the 5, steel and brass. Shows the different sizes that these are available in. Okay, in a BB5006. Be very typical to have a hinge that would be 4 wide or 4.5 inch wide, or 6 by 4.5, or 4.5 by 4. Meaning the 4.5 or the 5 by 5 may not be the right hinge for you to use. And what I'm driving at here, and by the way, the 3-knuckle version is here, the LB. People like 3-knuckle versus 5-knuckle because it's argued, and I believe successfully so, that it's a cleaner looking hinge. If you're looking for a hinge barrel that's less busy, go for the LB 8006. Okay, 3-knuckle hinge. Now, the size is really governed by the requirement, as I had said earlier. So let's switch to here, the link below this video, to the manufacturer's page. That will allow us to pull up the manufacturer's page indeed, but what I'm driving at is the product catalog. And the product catalog, I happen to know, in the front section of the catalog is the formula by which you will determine the width of the hinge that you require. And we may have passed right over it. Yes, we have. Here it is. Okay, so how wide of a hinge do you need? I don't know if 5-inch wide was the right hinge for this client. It's very possible that it was not. Okay, so what I'm driving at there is you can have a, you know, a frame that you're wrapping the wall. You could also have an application where you're butting up against the wall. The question really becomes is, where do you need that vertical axis of pivoting? I mean, you can see if it's over here, you might have to really think about what that door is going to look like when it gets from closed to 90 to 180. You know, you can have a problem. I should say, are you going to have a problem in here? And the distance from this vertical axis of pivoting has everything to do with that. So it is certainly lazily assumed that a 4.5 4.5 is correct, or a 5x5 is correct. I would say that in many, many instances it is not correct, and I would say in all instances you need to determine what that is. So here's the formula. Take the door thickness and subtract the hinge back set. Door thickness minus the hinge back set, which is generally a 1/4 inch. Doesn't have to be a 1/4 inch, but it generally is. So let's say that this is 1 3/4 less a 1/4 inch, that's 1.5 inches. Multiply that by 2, that's 3 inch. Let's say then you have to add to it the inset, which is the dimension from the face of the frame to the face of the door, and that's usually very, very small, less than 1/8 of an inch. Let's just say it's 1/8 of an inch. So 3 inch plus the inset of 1/8 is 3 1/8, plus the clearance. Well, in the case of a frame like this, there is no clearance because our frame is wrapping the wall, so that's 0. In an instance like this, there is a clearance dimension. Let's say that that's 1.5 inches. And let's say that this one is 0. So 3 1/8 plus 0, you go to the next widest hinge, and the formula tells us that the width of the hinge you need is 4 inch, because you don't want that vertical axis of pivoting any further away from the center of the thickness of the door than it can be helped. Now, where you have 1.5 inch clearance, we know we're at 3 1/8 plus 1.5 inches, that's going to be 4 5/8. Okay, go to the next biggest size, that's 5 inch. So that's how you would determine that. So you'll always want to run the formula. Door thickness minus hinge back set times 2 plus the inset plus the clearance. Many times that's 0. If you're ever in your favorite coffee shop and they have a knockdown drywall frame, that's going to wrap the wall. There should never be a 4.5 inch hinge on that sort of application, in my opinion, when the door is going to 90 degree only. It should always be a 4 inch wide hinge, always. Okay? If you're going to put a 5 3/4 jamb in an 8 inch block wall and you want to go to 180 degrees, yeah, you need to run the formula, because the architect has said, this is a daycare, I need that door to go to 180, and I need staff to latch that door, hook that door in the open position for recess in and out of the building. That's what the operational description calls for. So running the formula is where that's all going to. Now, what else is in this catalog in the beginning section is literally an encyclopedia of hinge nomenclature. Not only how to determine the width of the hinge, and some shortcuts are here as well. And here's that formula written again. Hinge types. What is swag on the hinge? I said that word earlier. Hinge handing. Some hinges are absolutely handed. Anchor hinges are going to be handed every single time. Those are unusual. I think in my 30-year career I have sold 1 or 2 openings of anchor hardware. Here it is. Really cool. I mean, talk about being able to keep a door and frame where it belongs. All this prep to the header is just a superb way of doing that. Getting back to where we were, hinge types. Talking about the difference between their 5 and 3 knuckle hinges. Okay. You can also do an LB. LB means well, I should say, when it's an LB 8000, it's a 3-knuckle. When it's an LB 5000, it's still 5-knuckle, but it's what they call lube bearing. It doesn't have these exposed bearing packets, and is probably about 25% better at handling the weight and the load of what the hinge is doing to begin with. Hinge types: full mortise, half surface, full surface, wide throw, swing clear, raised barrel, anchor, slip-in style hinge. A great document for learning that. Also hospital tip style as well. That's to help prevent people from hooking something on there, rendering it to be somewhat ligature resistant, no doubt. Security options: NRP is the most common, a non-removable pin. Okay, non-removable pin. You can also do a security stud, and a security stud is a circular object about the size of a dime that is screwed to the back of the hinge and on one leaf. The opposite leaf has a hole, so that when the leaves close, that dime diameter, about a 1/4 inch thick, will reside within that space, so that even if you drove the pin out, you still couldn't separate the leaves. It's not uncommon to have a belt and suspender approach with non-removable and security stud. Maximum security stud are those same dime-sized items, but now they're on the back side of the hinge, allowing it to go into the reinforcement of the door and frame, really preventing that hinge from coming out when the door is in the closed position, even, again, if you drive that pin out of the hinge. Okay. Decorative tips. How to order. This document will be the last document we look at. This is the how to order matrix on all things Bommer. The only thing challenging with Bommer sometimes, or at least for me, is how their sizing runs. They have codes for their sizing. So if you're not sure of what you need, be sure to ask. You don't want to order the wrong size. I know that I did that one time just because I assumed that a 4.5 by 4.5 would be a 4.54. I got the hinges. I'm like, why are they 4-inch wide? Well, because I assumed a 4.50 is your 4.5, 4.5. This is how you'll put all of your part numbers together. Okay, let's wrap up this video on camera. Okay, now in conclusion, what else is in the hinge? And again, that's your button tip. That's right there. You can drive that pin out. It's not a problem. Should you need to, for some reason, drive the pin out, I mean, other than hanging the door, I generally will drive the pin out, attach my leaves, and then get the door in the opening, and then tap the pins down. What else you're going to get, and by the way, this hinge weighs about 1.87 pound, which in the world of hinges, this is about a 1/2 pound heavier than standard. You're going to get fasteners. This comes with all machine screws and half wood screws. Okay, non-ferrous, because that's what we're selling. Now be mindful. There are all machine. There are 8 machine screws in there, but only 4 wood screws. The factory is definitely assuming that you're doing a metal door or at least a metal something. But what if you're doing a wood door and a wood frame? Is it possible? Absolutely. You could definitely have an aluminum frame with an unusual thickness, like a 2.25 inch aluminum door. Those exist, absolutely. So we don't want to assume that you've got, aluminum by aluminum or wood by wood or metal by metal. In that aluminum example, you would use the machine screws. But let's say that you had a, obviously a very common wood door and wood frame. You want to define, when you're ordering the material, what you expect, what you require in the packaging when it shows up. Number 12 by 1.25 threaded to the head, flat head, stainless steel wood screws. Where will you, on a Saturday morning, where are you going to get those? So be mindful. Specify at the time of order. What else is in the packaging are shims. Bommer is not the only company that provides perforated pieces of cardboard that will help you shim the door, but most do not. I think that's accurate to say. They use them to obviously separate the hinges as well when they ship, but it's nice to have a shim included in the packaging so that you can very conveniently have a way just to move that door a little bit back and forth. This would be authorized, approved for use on a fire door. It's listed for use on fire doors. Cardboard shims, however, are not. You'd need steel shims. The name Bommer has been synonymous with hinges, especially single and primarily double-acting spring hinges, since 1876, literally. Ownership of Bommer today is the husband of the granddaughter of one of the two brothers that founded the company in that year, 1876. A fact that Bommer is quite proud of. Speaking of facts that Bommer are quite proud of, here's another one. Right above the logo it says, Made in USA. That's a fact that I'm quite proud of to be a representative for Bommer. Other manufacturers' hinges will have their logo and then say USA. Doesn't mean made in USA, so be mindful. Thank you very much.